Yeah, there's no question there are many high quality stocks. And in fact, the portfolio that we recently have invested with, India was the second after Taiwan in terms of weighting, country weighting. So there are a lot of good quality stocks. But as we go forward, you're going to see a lot of these power companies, transportation companies come to the market, issuing more shares in the market. And you're going to see some huge IPOs coming in. And that's going to strengthen and increase the size. And therefore, a lot of people around the world will not be able to avoid India. You know, about half of the global investors today invest according to the index, the global
Yeah.
index. And as you get bigger in the index, they're forced to invest in your companies. So that will happen to India.
Folks, welcome to PaisaVaisa. I'm your host Anupam Gupta, B50 on Twitter. And on today's episode, I'm honored, really honored, to feature an investing legend, a veteran of emerging markets and financial markets, Mark Mobius of Mobius Capital Partners. We're going to talk about his new book, The Book of Wealth, and much more. So, welcome to PaisaVaisa, and thank you so much for doing this for our listeners. It's an honor to have you with us, sir.
Well, thank you. It's an honor for me as well.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, you've written so many books, including comics, and I've lost count. And folks, if you want to find that out, just go to markmobius.com. You'll find the entire list of books as well as Japanese manga, if I'm not mistaken. A
That's
lot of
right. Yes.
comics out there. Yeah. So you've written about 10 plus books. The latest book is called The Book of Wealth. It's a nice under 200 pages book that focuses on a lot of aspects for youngsters. So, what was the idea behind the book and who is it for?
Well, we were targeting people who are just beginning to think about investing, young people in their teen years, even the early 20s, because we felt that there are a lot of people out there, young people who are just graduating and thinking about uh, creating wealth for themselves. So we thought it would be a good thing to write a book which gives them the options and gives them a view of someone who's been at this business for a long, long time and hopefully give them some insight into the mistakes I've made as well as some of the good things I've done. So it's been a very fun book to do.
Yeah. And I really like how you open the book when you're speaking about things that are not directly to do with money. Stuff like staying healthy, being frugal, reading a lot of books, meeting people. Now, these are things that have this nice old school feel to it because in today's generation, I don't know whether, this even uh, the youth today understand the importance of this. I want to start with staying healthy. I mean, just look at you. You seem ageless. I read on the internet you're 87 years old. I mean, wow. It's just amazing. I mean, you would have seen so much of stuff. Could you just walk us through why health, frugality, reading, meeting a lot of people is really important, before we start this journey of becoming wealthy?
Well, one of the first things I mentioned in the book is health is wealth. If you're talking about wealth, you've got to be healthy. And the reason for that is, first of all, if you end up being wealthy, you're not going to be enjoying it unless you're healthy rather. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the longer you live, the wealthier you can become. It takes time very often to become wealthy. You know, you have to save, you have to start making the right investment decisions, and that takes time. So that's why I emphasize at the very beginning of the book, hey, if you want to become wealthy, you've got to be healthy to begin with.
Yeah.
And I try to follow that philosophy as well. I exercise every day. I try to watch my diet. Of course, I'm not that careful about my diet, but otherwise, and also you have to be optimistic about life because
Yeah.
that has an impact on your health as well. So healthy and wealthy go together.
Frugality. That is something which, is also a little bit difficult these days given the kind of technologies we have and the splurging we do, the indulgences we do. Frugality, sir. What about that?
Well, that's the other aspect of being wealthy because if you start life, and this is the reason why I mention this to young people in particular, you've got to learn how to be frugal, to do with less. Because if you start your life that way, you will become wealthy faster because there's a compounding effect. If you're saving and you're reinvesting that savings wisely, you will become wealthy much quicker. So, one of the things you notice about the very wealthy people, so many of them are quite frugal. They're very, very careful the way they spend their money, the way they behave. And by the way, you don't have to be happy and wealthy by being a spendthrift. In other words, if you're spending a lot of money and shopping all over the town, so forth, that doesn't necessarily make you happy. So that's
Yeah.
the reason why I mentioned that frugality is a very important part of being wealthy.
Yeah. Reading books, I mean, that's a favorite. You're an author. I know that you read widely. Why is that important? Because in this day and age where bite size information is consumed throughout almost 24 hours a day, sitting down and reading a book is almost seems like a challenge to a lot of people. And yet, it's important, right? So,
Well, the wonderful thing about what's happening today in the world is with the internet and with communications, the way it's speeding up, young people have the opportunity to get an education without going to any school. And again, I mentioned to them, don't worry about getting a degree. Of course, it's nice for you to be in a university and getting a degree, mainly because you're associating with other people and you're learning from them. I know that when I went to the university, I learned as much from other students than from the professor. But any case, nowadays it's not necessary to go to a formal institution. You can sit down with your computer and learn so much. You can read books, you can do various examinations, you can look at what other people are doing. It's just an amazing thing that's happening in the world today. And one of the reasons, by the way, why I'm so optimistic about India is because you've got all these young people who now have access to this incredible technology and this wealth of knowledge, which they can get at a very, very low cost.
yeah. And my favorite, meeting people. You've given the example of Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, how they've built large companies. And of course, in the process, also increase their wealth. These companies have become institutions. There are products that we use every day. And the one thing common with all of them, when you mentioned about how Microsoft was built with, I think, Paul Allen and a few other people initially in the original founding team, then Steve Ballmer. You've taken so many examples out there. This meeting people thing, and you would know, right? Because you've traveled and you continue to travel so extensively. Why is it important to meet people?
The reason why it's so important to meet people is that you get different views. As you know, in the book, I mentioned the need for keeping an open mind, be willing to accept new ideas. And by meeting people, you can get access new ideas and new concepts. Of course, you can do that by reading books, but by meeting people, you get even greater insight and you get a greater scope of knowledge, which is so important.
Yeah. So you're 87 years old, if I've got the age right, and you've traveled a lot. What does the average day of Mark Mobius look like? Like, what do you wake up and do? And, has it changed in the recent past, or have you been maintaining the same routine for as long as you can remember? I want to get the routine and discipline of your life, because um, for someone who's had such varying experiences, traveling, reading, writing, investing, what does your routine look like?
Well, what I do is in the morning, I get up, and the first thing I do is get on a stationary bicycle and I cycle for half an hour and read a book at the same time. By the way, this is a great way to accomplish two things at one time. So you're getting exercise and also you're learning. Then I have a light breakfast, and then I go start working on my computer and on the various paperwork I have to do. And then in the evening, I usually will also go to the gym and do some weight training if I have time. And then after that, I have dinner. So that's a normal routine. Even when I'm traveling around the world, I will follow that routine as much as possible. And by the way, the whole idea of keeping young is really relating to exercise. Uh, willing to, your body is there to be used. The old saying, use it or lose it. And that's true of not only your body, but also your mind. So you must try to do that on a regular basis.
Uh, I want to talk about travel because that is such a fascinating part of your life. I remember when I had last, me and Saurabh Mukherjee had last spoken to you back in 2019 for our book, The Victory Project. You spoke about how in your early college days, was it when you were staying in Japan with this family out, then you learned so much. Yes. Do you still travel, as much as you used to? Has it come down? I mean, I'm just, what about that?
Oh, I travel a great deal. This year, I've been to Japan, Korea, Okinawa, Hong Kong, Philippines, Vietnam, South Africa, Chile, Brazil, you name it. I've been all over the world this
Does
year.
your does the do they have a special edition for you for your passport? Because the kind of stamps that they must be having must be insane. Well,
Uh, I'm
so
having a problem. I'm running out of pages.
why is travel important and how has that enriched your life? I want to really talk about that for a while because you've covered that aspect in your previous books, and anyone who knows you knows the kind of travel that you've done. But how does travel give you that competitive edge, say, in investing, in thinking, and in generally, living a very fulfilled life?
Travel is so important because seeing is believing. You know the saying, seeing is believing. You can read all the books you want. You can talk to many people on the internet, but unless you see them face to face, you don't get a full understanding of their life and their work. And particularly when you're investing in companies, it's so important to visit the management, to look at their factory if they're running a manufacturing business, and so forth. In fact, this morning we just visited a distributor of healthcare equipment, and I got a tremendous amount of insight that I would not have gotten by reading their on-site web page and so forth. So travel takes time. It's not easy, but it's so important, so critical to being successful.
Okay, I like that you've dedicated a large section of your book to investment opportunities. That's like the heart of the book, the core of the book. And you've covered asset classes, you've covered episodes in financial history. For example, the 1929 crash, the 2008 2009 global crisis, and of course, you've spoken about legendary investors as well. How do you think the readers should look at this section? What's your message from this investment opportunity section of the book? What should they learn from it?
The first thing is that they should be diversified. It's very important to not have your eggs in one basket. That's it. That's critical. Of course, there are some people that focus on only one thing, and if they only do that, they can be successful. But by and large, from an investment point of view, you should be diversified. But, and this is the big but, you must have most of your assets in companies, in listed companies. And the reason for that is that if you pick good companies with good managements, basically you're getting partners with some of the best people in the world. You have a partnership with these people, they are earning money for you. So, and also a good company will always be able to beat any inflation, regardless of where you may be, because they're adjusting their prices to the devaluation of the currency and the inflation which this happens to occur. So I hope in the book I've been able to get this point across. As you know, I talk about gold, I talk about commodities, I talk about uh, bonds, I talk about real estate and other investments, and these are all fine, but most important is to be invested in a diversified portfolio of stocks.
I also noticed that you've covered investors like from Jesse Livermore, traders like Jesse Livermore, to investors like Ray Dalio. So, who would be your gurus? People that for a lot of people, you are their guru. But who,
I
who,
would say
who, please go on.
John
Sorry.
Templeton. Yeah,
Oh,
John Templeton would be he was my mentor, and I really admired him so much, and he was so successful as well. He was really the first a truly global investor in America. He believed that if you want to find the best bargains, you've got to look globally. You just can't look at the US. And he was the man who asked me to start the very first emerging markets fund, which was in itself a very big revolutionary change. So I really admired him. He was a very frugal man, by the way. Another aspect, he was a very optimistic man. Um, and he was a real student. Was always learning. And I remember because a lot of people, he lived in Nassau, Bahamas, and he lived near a very nice beach in a place called Life at Key. And people would see him at lunchtime in the water, walking in the water, reading a broker report or a book. So that gives you some idea of the kind of man he was.
What was that like? You just wake up one fine day in the morning and your mentor tells you that you've got to cover emerging markets. Nobody in the Western world at that point of time had even looked at them. What was that moment like for you, sir?
Well, it was interesting and very fortuitous because by that time I had already lived in Japan, in Hong Kong, in Thailand, and I had gotten a feel for the emerging markets in Asia at least. And then I was in Taiwan at the time, running the very first investment trust in Taiwan. And this call came from Templeton to start this emerging markets fund. And it was a difficult choice for me because, I was living a very good life in Taiwan. I, you know, I was head of this Chinese organization. I'd come in the morning. They'd give me a stamp. You have to stamp all your documents. Stamp, 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 stamp. Okay, let's go to lunch. So it was a wonderful life. But then I realized that this was an incredible opportunity because it meant a global opportunity to look globally and to really follow in Templeton's footsteps in a completely new direction because so many of these markets were closed. We had 100 million at the beginning, and it was so difficult to find
Put
where to
them in.
invest.
What year was this, sir?
This is at 1987.
Oh boy, look at that. I don't think.
Okay, India was closed. There was no China, no Russia, no Eastern Europe. Most of Latin America was closed. Only Mexico we could invest. There were only five markets in which we could invest: Hong Kong,
1987. Yeah,
Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, and Mexico. That was
yeah,
it.
amazing. So, putting that piece in the past, now looking at the future, I noticed that in your book you've mentioned meme stocks, you've mentioned GameStop. So you've obviously, you've seen how this new trend of social media and investing has shaped out and how that has moved markets. What about artificial intelligence, sir? How do you think that's going to impact investor behavior as well as capital markets going forward?
Well, it's very good that you mentioned that because with the new fund we're starting, we will be using what we call quantamental approach. In other words, using the quant tools as well as the fundamental tools, which, fundamental investing has been with us. John Templeton and all the other legendary investors were using this system. And now, with computerization, the quant tools are with us, and we want to use those. But overlaying all of this is AI, artificial intelligence, which is basically a tool which speeds up calculations and which widens the scope of the database. So instead of just looking at the balance sheet and profit and loss statements of companies, we can now go to the internet and ask, what do people think of this company? What is the chatter on the internet about this company? What is the background of the people that are running this company? And so forth. And we can get this very quickly and effectively. So I think this is going to change the nature of investing. It already is changing the nature of investing for the better as we go forward.
So you've when was the last time you were in India? What are your views about India? What's looking good to you?
In the middle of this year, I visited over 8 cities all
Wow.
over India. We went from the north to south. It was a
Yeah.
wonderful experience. I
And
really enjoyed it.
you were coming after how long, and what did you find, different or new? Because India is, I mean, you've been coming here very often
Yes.
since I think for quite
It
some
was
time.
about 2 years that
Wow.
I had not come to India. But this time, usually it was just Mumbai, maybe Delhi, and that's it. This time we really covered the waterfront. We went all over the country, and of course, I really enjoyed. Of course, one of the things I wanted to do is go to Hyderabad and look at the sets of the Bahubali film,
The
which were
film
my
setting.
favorite films.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Did you
I love
did you get a
that.
chance to did you get a chance to do that?
Yes, I went to Ramali, the Ramali theme park, and I had some pictures taken with the sets of Bahubali. So that was a highlight of my.
Nice.
And we went to so many religious sites all over the country. Uh, what I loved about India, and I still do, is the incredible cultural diversity. Number one, and the depth of the culture, which is so important. I think a lot of people don't appreciate the fact that the cultural depth of India, of course, which has contributed to culture all over the world, as you know, is something that is a big strength of the country.
Okay. What's looking good to you in the economy and the markets as such in India in terms of investment opportunities or anything out here that you'd like to talk about, sir?
I would say, of course, our emphasis is usually on technology. We love the software companies. We love the companies that are doing hardware. And I believe India is going to become a big producer of semiconductors and other hardware. But for India at this stage, I would say power and transportation is so important.
Hmm.
Uh, the companies that are involved in producing power, electricity, either through whatever means possible, hopefully through more uh, environmentally friendly ways. But this is a very important area because India will need more and more power going forward. That's number one. And number two, transportation. The rail network in India is very important to the
True.
success of the country, and they're doing a lot to improve that the railway network, and that's going to become important. And the airlines. One of the things I was so pleased with in our trip recently in India was the improvement in the airline transportation. It's incredible, very well done. So I
Yeah,
would
but
say those areas are important.
sure, but the crowds at the airport do what do they look like today as compared to say 20 or 30 years ago where air travel was still yeah.
A big, big difference. A big difference. the
I
the airports are so nice now.
Yeah. Oh, how would you compare this to other emerging markets, especially in Southeast Asia, where the similar transformations have happened? Societies, countries, economies like a South Korea, a China, even the Philippines, and all they've all gone under similar transformations where consumer economy has boomed. A lot of things have happened. You think India is getting it right this time? I mean, when you compare it to these other places which have also gone up the curve, like how we are doing right now?
Well, definitely. I mean, if you look at the growth rate in the economy, in the Indian economy, you know that they're moving in that direction very, very quickly. Uh, Look at Korea. When I first went to Korea, this was right after the Korean War. The whole country was destroyed. There were no trees.
Yeah.
The country is all brown. Now
Wow.
you go there, it's green, it's wealthy. Per capita income in Korea is higher than in Spain. So India is definitely going to move in that direction, is moving in that direction as we speak.
Yeah, well, there's one thing about the whole China plus one and China's competitiveness and their growth and whatever's happening out there, and how India can or should benefit from that. I recall in a recent interview where you had said that all that's fine, but there's one thing that still is a challenge here in India from an investor's perspective, and that's size, as in availability of very high quality stock for investors to put their money in. Maybe that's still a limitation. So, any thoughts there, sir?
Yeah, there's no question there are many high quality stocks. And in fact, the portfolio that we recently have invested with, India was the second after Taiwan in terms of weighting, country weighting. So there are a lot of good quality stocks. But as we go forward, you're going to see a lot of these power companies, transportation companies come to the market, issuing more shares in the market. And you're going to see some huge IPOs coming in, and that's going to strengthen and increase the size. And therefore, a lot of people around the world will not be able to avoid India. You know, about half of the global investors today invest according to the index, the global
Yeah.
index. And as you get bigger in the index, they're forced to invest in your companies. So that will happen to India.
Yeah, maybe they will have India dedicated funds also at some point of time later in the
It's,
future. So a lot of young Indians. I mean, you would know that India the demographic is quite young. It's young, it's vibrant. A
yes.
lot of young Indians are coming in and entering in the stock markets, also today. And I'm not sure they've seen the volatility that you have over your lifetime of investing so far. Um, and your book is also so ideal for these young Indians who are coming in and investing in the market. I hope that they read it. What's your message to them? How should they? Why should they invest in the stock markets in India? How should they deal with volatility? And why stocks are an important portfolio item for them in their long-term, investments.
Well, first of all, in terms of stocks, it's very, very important to be in good companies with good managements simply because you're beating inflation. Uh, Regardless of what country you're in, whether you're in the US, India, China, whatever, currencies devalue and you have inflation as a result. So the way to escape this problem is to be invested in good stocks. That's number one. Number two, you've got to be reasonably diversified, but not too diversified. You know, have a portfolio of maybe 20, 30 stocks, hopefully global stocks, stocks that have a footprint globally. So you have uh, good opportunities all over the world and you have exposure to those good opportunities. And the third thing is you've got to be patient, not be too much in a rush in trading in and out. Of course, you can put stop loss limits on your holdings to prevent, a big disaster. But generally speaking, you've got to be longer term. Look at a 5 year horizon. So when you're investing in a stock, think about what is this company going to do in 5 years? Not next year, not 2 years, but 5 years. And that will put you on the path to a more stable kind of wealth creation.
I'm not sure whether you've read, but a lot of Indians are also dabbling in derivatives. Okay, there's a nice section in your book on derivatives also, futures, options, and stuff like that. And Indians just love it. I know it's probably, uh, I think there might have been similar experiences in emerging markets also when new people come in as investors and they do all this gambling kind of thing. What's your message to these young people in investing in these derivatives, small ticket items, gambling the entire day in the stock market?
Yeah, I would tell them be very, very careful because so much money has been lost with derivatives. Derivatives cost money, and particularly if you're shorting, if you involving in naked, what they call naked shorting, you could lose a lot. You could lose your entire wealth. So I would say to people, if you're starting out, don't get involved in derivatives. Invest in good, solid stocks. Don't borrow. Do it with your own money, and just you'll see your wealth grow. But derivatives can be very dangerous.
Yeah. So our last question, sir, standard question to all our guests and especially to you, because I know that you read widely. It's part of your book also. What book or books are you reading, and do you have any recommendations for our listeners?
Well, it's funny. I was looking at my library and I picked up a book called "Hedge Funds in Emerging Markets." There's this
Okay,
that was written during the crisis, the Asian crisis, the Asian finance.
1998.
Yeah, and that was interesting. Written by an Australian professor about the impact of the various hedge funds on the currencies in Asia. So that was one book I've just finished. Another book I'm reading now is on the internet. On it's called The Hype Machine, and it's a very good book. It explains how the so-called hype machine works, how companies like uh, the various Google and other companies like that
Yeah.
analyze their audiences, and that's very important to read and understand what's happening on the internet.
Fantastic, sir. I hope that I can host you in our studio the next time that you are here in Mumbai. But all the very best for you folks. The book is called The Book of Wealth. It's a wrap on. Please go and check that out. Take two on that. Folks, the book is called The Book of Wealth. It's available on Amazon and wherever you get your books from. Please do check it out. It's a nice, small book. Page for page, you will get more insights there, probably from anywhere else that you can. Like I said, it covers good habits, investment opportunities, and a whole lot more. The author with us and honor, Mark Mobius. Sir, thank you so much for doing this for our listeners.
Thank you very much. All the best. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Bye.
I V M.